Hello, and welcome to my short video, Systemic. What? Why? In this brief introduction, I will approach the word systemic that you might have heard in a variety of contexts, together with many other words you might know. It's not to be confused with the word systematic. To start, a short story. You might have heard a story like this. A bunch of wise and unfortunately somewhat blind men have been asked to inspect an elephant and report back what it is. And the first, who had been led to a task, says it's a spear. The second says, no, it's more like a snake. The third says, oh no, it's more like a leathery column. And the fourth, who had been led to the tail end, says, no, 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 it's more like a rope hanging from the heavens. And when you pull it, it rains. What this story illustrates is how the whole relates to the parts, or how the parts themselves cannot explain the whole, even if we had many more wise men who were inspecting different details of the elephant. You might have heard the saying that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the reason why that is because the whole is the parts plus the relationships between the parts and the relationships to its environment. Bigger whole, if you wish. Now, how do these parts now relate to each other? What is the pattern that connects these parts? To see that, we take another example. Let's take partner dance. Any of you who have ever watched or maybe done themselves partner dance, it's virtually impossible to understand it with just looking at one dance partner. We need to see the other one. We need to see what happens between them. We need to see how they position themselves towards each other. Let's just, for illustration's sake, things change the positioning, and we see we have a very different story. So how do they relate? Well, one person does something that influences the other person, they do another thing, they do another movement, and it influences the first person, and so on and so on. The dance continues. And these kind of influences, mutual influences, happen in any groups of people. Well, in fact, any groups of things and people and animals and what have you. But let's just stay with people for the moment. One person influences another. They might be also influenced by somebody else who had been influenced in the first place by the first person, and so on. There's this whole web of relationship, and it can become quite complex quite quickly. And you ask yourself now, okay, but so what? Well, some of these patterns can be tricky, can be problematic. Let's take a family, for example. Let's say here's a child and the child occasionally misbehaves. Maybe they have a parent who is working hard, gets a bit annoyed, and thinks like, oh no, discipline needs to be enforced. Discipline! And so they tell the child off. And the child calms down, and then parent can go back to work or whatever they're doing. And then it's a stable pattern, and so far so good. But let's make it one step more complex. Let's say there's another parent too, who witnesses this interaction, and maybe they feel more like, all you need is love. So admonishingly they look at person one and say to the child, there, and child in return gives them love and affection, and it's beautiful because it brings that person in, so there's something good about this. But there's something bad because person number one feels undermined, and maybe they feel they need to force more discipline, and so on and so on. We could see this pattern continuing and continuing, maybe escalating, maybe becoming really problematic. And maybe, depending on your own beliefs and your own tastes, you have somebody whom you would blame here. Maybe you would blame person one or person two, or even the child. And the fact is, any of the three here could do something different. Now, that's still a small group. How is that when there's bigger groups? Now, well, I don't even want to draw all the lines of influence because it becomes very, very complex. Maybe the person from sales doesn't want to speak to the person from production or whatever, and so on, and they have beef with each other, and the boss comes in, and when the boss tries to resolve the conflict, that's not good. But even this big organization has also influences from the outside. So maybe stress increases in the organization when the competitor is earlier with releasing a new product. But we, in turn, our organization, of course, influences also the competitor. Now, the trouble with all of that is we often don't see the patterns that we're part of. And the reason for that is A, its complexity, and B, it's virtually impossible to see the wood for the trees. Have heard that? Yeah. Well, it's because you cannot see the forest when you're in it, right? But what you do know is that you or anybody, let's say in this case this person here, could do something differently. They change their position. All these lines of influence collapse maybe to be immediately replaced by a new pattern. And we don't know yet whether this will be a better pattern. But definitely, if you want to start thinking systemically, you can ask yourself, what could I do differently that makes a difference, that maybe creates better outcomes? And sometimes, just sometimes, you need somebody else to help you do that. Or maybe you are somebody who helps others do that by asking the right questions, by helping them thinking through what might be the next outcome, what would happen then. So I hope you enjoyed this little video. You can come and find me at systemark.co.uk. Please also give me some feedback on that video. It would be lovely to hear what you think. And if you liked it, maybe I can create more. Thank you very, very, very much.